Hey everybody, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the new 24-70 f2.8 S2. This is the second generation or the new version of the Z-mount 24-70 2.8. And first of all, some of you might be thinking, well, what was wrong with the first gen 24-70? Well, that lens has been out for about 6 years now, and this new 24-70 has a whole new exterior design, a whole new interior design, and it's also the world's first 24-70 with an internal zoom. So a lot's changed in this 24-70. We'll talk about what I like, what I don't like, what I found out shooting with this lens over the past few weeks, and hopefully answer your questions that you might have about this 24-70 2.8. So first things first, let's talk about the exterior design. What's changed? Why is it different to the first generation 24-70? Well, you'll see straight away when it comes to size that when both of the lenses are at 24, the new lens is actually slightly larger. But when both of the lenses are zoomed, then the new lens quickly becomes the smaller lens. Having an internal zoom means that when you zoom the lens towards the 70mm focal length, it no longer gains size. It no longer expands from the front element like the old lens used to do. So that means that yes, when it goes in your bag at 24mm, it's still going to be slightly larger than the previous lens. But when it extends and when you're using that lens, or if you're using it for video where you might be using it on gimbals and so on, the lens is not going to extend. It's going to stay at the same shape and same size. Now that internal zoom also means that there's no element that's moving in and out from the outside to the inside of the lens, meaning that it's not going to draw in as much dust, it's not going to draw in moisture. If there's anything that lands on that inside barrel, it can then be pushed through the seal into that lens as well. So generally speaking, an internal zooming lens often has a slightly better weather sealing built into it. So what about the outside of the lens and the design of it? Well, the 24-70 now looks very similar to the 24-120 in terms of its design. Gone is the top plate screen. You'll no longer find that top plate screen on this 24-70. And in its place, you'll find a new function button. So you now have two lens function buttons, but they are classed as the same lens function button, so they'll do the same job. There are not lens function button 1 and function button 2. We also now have a autofocus and manual focus switch followed by a full and limit focusing switch. Whereas on the previous lens, all you would have found is the autofocus and manual focusing switch. There was no focus limiting switch on the previous generation. Now, one new function that I really like the idea of is that the control ring can have its click turned on or off. If you have it set to click, you'll get that traditional kind of clicky dial. Or if you turn the click off, you'll get that nice smooth transition. We also then have a rubberized manual focusing ring at the front of the lens, whereas on the previous 24-70, that was a metal manual focusing ring. It wasn't rubberized like the zoom ring was. And also one thing that I do find quite nice is that the physical rubber of the zoom ring is significantly larger, making it easier to kind of grab that lens and quickly zoom if you needed to, if you're in a very busy environment or if you're drastically trying to change focal length quickly. So all round, the exterior kind of ergonomics of this lens have been vastly improved. When it comes to filter sizes, we've also dropped down, symbolizing how much smaller this lens is. We've gone down from 82mm to 77mm. And you do feel that in the hand. It does feel like a significantly smaller lens to handle when it comes to the width of the lens and that filter thread size. 77mm fitting in with the 70-200 and also with the 24-120mm focal length lenses. You'll also notice that both of these lenses are made in Japan, but the newer generation of lens has a significantly closer focusing distance, now being able to focus as close as 24 centimeters versus the 38 centimeters of the previous lens. Thanks to that internal zoom and new optical design, it means that this is the world's lightest 24-70 2.8, clocking in at 675 grams. It's noticeably lighter than the previous 24-70 2.8, which clocked in at 805 grams. And when shooting with it, I definitely did notice that weight difference throughout an entire day when I was switching between the two. Just straight away, the new 24-70 felt significantly lighter than the previous one. So 130 grams might not sound a lot, but it is definitely a noticeable difference when holding in the hand. So let's talk about that new optical design on the inside. This lens now consists of 14 elements in 10 groups, whereas the old lens consisted of 17 elements in 15 groups. So it is a more simple optical design. And that's what gives it that lighter weight and that smaller size. Now, for those of you that plan on using this 24-70 for portraiture or for weddings or for events, this lens now has 11 aperture blades, whereas the previous lens only had 9 aperture blades. And the more aperture blades that you have, the smoother the transition is from sharp to blur, or the smoother your bokeh is going to be when shooting at that shallow depth of field, shooting wide open at f2.8. So we'll take some example shots. We'll take a look at whether that is going to be any better than the previous lens and see if we can see any differences. But generally, physically, the more blades you have, the nicer the aperture is going to look. Nikon have also designed a new lens hood for this lens, and it looks like a normal lens hood, like you would expect it to be, but it does have one new feature, and that is an access window for using this lens hood whilst also using variable NDs or circular polarizers. This has obviously been added in from a video market point of view, especially for adjusting a variable ND quickly whilst making use of your lens hood, but can also be useful from a photography point of view for those of you who are using circular polarizers. So all round, a really nice little feature just to add in, and something we should start to see in more lens hoods going forward, but just a really nice access window for adjusting filters when the lens hood is on the lens itself. So right at the start of this video, I said that Nikon are claiming that this is their fastest focusing lens ever. And they're claiming that it's up to 5 times faster at focusing than the previous 24-70. And this 24-70 was not known for being a slow to focus lens. And they're also saying that it has a significantly faster scan rate. And a scan rate is how quickly the lens can focus from near to far and back again if you were moving from one subject to another. At the telephoto end, this lens is 40% faster at its scan rate. So a significantly faster focusing lens than the previous generation f2.8. So how has Nikon managed to make these improvements? Well, the first one is that they've employed a new type of focusing motor. The focusing motors in this new 24-70 are the Silky Swift VCM motors that we saw in the 400mm 2.8 and the 600mm f4. These focusing motors significantly reduce noise by up to 50%, and they also reduce vibration. So not only are they moving faster, but they're also going to be quieter, and they're going to give you less vibration through the lens as well. Nikon have put a new ABS optical encoder into this 24-70 2.8. What does that mean? Well, it's used to detect the exact location of the autofocusing elements, giving you significantly more accurate autofocus, especially when focusing at speed. Compared to the current 24-70, it means that this 24-70's autofocusing elements can be accurately detected 20 times more accurately than the previous generation. This accurate precision detection means that this lens can be more accurate, and the camera can know exactly where the lens elements are and where to drive those focusing elements depending on the movement of your subject when autofocusing. Now, in real world terms, that should mean that we should see faster focusing, faster tracking focus, and also that improved scan rate, so being able to move from near to far and so on. So after all that, as a quick summary, all that technology means that you can focus faster than ever before, be more accurate with your focusing than ever before, and all whilst using a lens that is an internal zoom, smaller when zoomed in, and lighter than the previous generation 24-70. But does that actually portray into real world results? So let's take a look at image quality of this lens compared to the previous generation. And let's also take a look at how quickly this lens can focus versus the previous generation. That's when we'll get an idea of whether all of these new additions are worthwhile. So let's take a look at that. First up, we have the new 24-70 f2.8 at 70mm and at f2.8, and we can see that the shift in focus is incredibly fast. It's shifting from the foreground subject to the background subject incredibly quickly. All I'm doing here is I'm just using the touchscreen to switch from one subject to another, and that focusing reacts incredibly fast and shifts the focus very, very quickly. And at that 70mm, this is where Nikon is saying that it's up to 40% faster than the older lens. So then when we take a look at the older 24-70, again at 70mm and at f2.8, you can see that there is a noticeable difference. It's not night and day, but the older lens is definitely slower to get moving. The very first part of the lens focusing is a lot slower. You can see it slowly transition, then it shifts into focus. So you can see that speed just slowly ramps up. So overall, yeah, the older lens is definitely slower to focus from point to point. But is it a massive difference? Not really. Okay, so when it comes to image comparisons, first of all, we're here at the 24mm end. Both lenses are 24mm, both lenses are at f2.8. We have the old version on the left and the new version on the right. And first things first, I feel like the newer version is the sharper lens, and we can see that on the image on the right hand side. But when we drop those lenses to 70mm, that sharpness level seems to drop off. It seems to be that they become a lot more equal in terms of their sharpness at 70mm. What's also worth noting is a slight difference in focal length. I feel like, especially at 70mm, which you can see here, I feel like the newer 24 to 70 is actually a little bit longer than the older 24 to 70. Both of them are at 70mm, but the effective focal length here looks slightly different. So my takeaway is this. They're clearly very close on image quality. There are some subtle differences in sharpness and detail, especially visible at the 24mm end. Maybe that they're more even at the 70mm end. But also, we clearly need to do way more testing. I don't have everything here with me. These were just meant to be some very quick tests just to give you a bit of insight in the differences between the two. And obviously also the newer 24 to 70 that I'm using here is also a sample lens. So what I think I'll do is when I get a full production unit, we'll do some really detailed tests between the two to figure out which one of these lenses optically is going to be the better lens. But right now, I would probably say it's a very small margin to the newer lens. And that's kind of what we would expect with a newer optical design. You would hope that it would be the optically better lens, but as I mentioned previously, the older 24 to 70 is still a really good 24 to 70, so it should be close. I just wanted to show you some of the still images that I've taken with this lens in a number of different locations, but also to show you the bokeh effect, and also to show you what it looks like if you wanted to use it to shoot starbursts. So first up with this shot, this is a nice simple kind of street photography style shot. This is taken with the idea of just having that blurred foreground, just to show you what your blurred foreground would look like when you're focusing on a subject in the background. For this next shot, I'm purposefully underexposing the scene, so I'm really making sure that I'm metering for the light that's hitting the building. That's what gives me this dark foreground, but again also gives us that blurred foreground element. Next up, we have this nice just flat on head-on shot, just to show you the level of detail and sharpness that you can retain. This has taken a middle focal length in the lens, so we're around about 45mm, I think. Next, we just have again a nice example of the bokeh here, so the traditional kind of blurry background, and to show you that fall off and separation from your area of sharpness to your area of softness and what that fall off looks like. I think it's quite nice, especially here in the foreground where we can see on the tree itself where it's going from sharp to soft. This next example is a similar thing, but we're shooting wide open at 24mm here, so the widest focal length rather than the previous shot which was at 70mm. So again, just showing you the level of bokeh that you can get even with that wide angle 24mm. Again, really nice separation in the bokeh in the background, just to give you an idea of what it would look like. I think it looks quite nice. It's not too busy, nice and smooth, not too distracting from the background of your subject. And then finally here we just have a really nice example of that starburst effect. I think for f13 this is actually a really nice kind of pinpoint starburst, so it's actually quite nice for any of you that might want to use this lens for that starburst effect. Hopefully you found this first look and those comparisons of the 24 to 70 f2.8s2 useful. If you have any questions about this lens, please do put them in the comments below. It's a lens that I quite like, actually. Having used this and using it versus the original, I liked the original lens, and it was actually the first 24 to 70 that I really liked. I've said multiple times that I never liked the F-mount 24 to 70s. I would always opt to use primes instead. But this 24 to 70 was reliable. I've used it in a number of situations, mainly kind of commercial like BTS and shots like that is where I opt for a 24 to 70. This new 24 to 70 just kind of improves on the things that I really liked about this lens, making it lighter, which makes a huge difference when using it for a full day's worth of photography. The internal zoom just gives you more of a flexibility when using it in kind of terrible conditions or rain or dust and so on. But also then just meaning you get accurate and faster focusing, which is always going to be a useful thing to have. So all in all, I'm happy with this new 24 to 70. If you already have this generation of 24 to 70, would you switch straight away? That's only really going to be an answer that you can answer. How important is that to you? How much sense financially does that decision make? Those are the types of questions you're going to have to ask yourself. Thank you so much for all of the support. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.